Hi, I'm artist Lillian Gray, and today I would like to introduce to you Namibian artist John Muafangejo. John Muafangejo is often thought of as a South African artist, but he is actually a Namibian. The reason people tend to think of him as a South African is that he is best known for the fact that he studied at the Rorke Art and Craft Center in Kwa-Zulu Natal, South Africa. Together with Azaria Mabata, Alina Ndebele, and Gordon Mabata, John Muafangejo is one of the most celebrated artists to emerge from the Rorke Arts and Crafts Center. In this video, I will be giving you a quick oversight of the Zeitgeist he grew up in, his biography, I take a deeper look at his style, the Linocut process, his subject matter, and 3 artworks you simply need to know by this artist. A quick reminder that you can shop various worksheets based on Rorke's Art and Craft Center on our Teachers Pay Teachers store. They are specially designed for various ages and are fun to do. Before we start with John Muafangejo's story, we need to look at the Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is a fancy word that simply means spirit of the times. We need to ask, what was life like when Muafangejo was alive? Now, during most of his life, Namibia was under South African rule and was known as South-West Africa. The National Party of South Africa imposed its apartheid laws, including racial classifications, on Namibia. In the later 20th century, uprising and demands for independence started. Following continued guerrilla warfare, Namibia obtained independence in 1990. Despite all odds, this boy, from a traditional rural upbringing, suppressed by the discriminatory rules of colonialism and apartheid, became an internationally respected artist. Today, he is honored and celebrated for his unique, bold style used in his printmaking. Let's delve into his story and discover what makes his art remarkable. John Muafangejo grew up in rural southern Africa in a traditional environment. John's father was a wealthy Kuanyama chief from the Ovambu tribe. The Ovambu people resided in the flat sandy grass plains in northern Namibia and southern Angola, sometimes called Ovambuland. The Ovambu tribe practices polygamy, which means a man can have more than one wife. The first wife is seen as the senior. His father had 8 wives and 18 children. After his father passed away, his mother, one of the 8 wives, wasn't entitled to an inheritance and was left destitute. She moved further down south, where she went to live at a mission station and converted to Christianity. The 12-year-old John had to follow his mother, but found it very upsetting to leave the kraal where he grew up. He joined the small missionary school and learned to read and write, the only member of his family to do so. His talent for drawing was noticed at the small school, and an uncle encouraged him to draw from everyday life experiences and to develop his own style. After school, an American priest helped Muafangejo with his application to the Arts and Crafts Center at the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Rorke Natal in South Africa. Now, Rorke Art and Crafts Center was a special place. It's often described as the most famous indigenous art center in South Africa. At the center, Muafangejo came into contact with different artistic techniques. The center is world-renowned for its pottery, tapestries, and printmaking. One of the reasons it's so special is that it offered arts and craft training for black people during an oppressive apartheid regime. Apartheid policies denied a formal education to black artists and crafters. Rorke taught craft and established a fine art school for people of all races. It created a unique space where people of all races were mixed to share ideas, insights, and skills. Not only were people from different races, but were also from different African and international countries. This created a unique fusion, European skills mixed with African stories and styles. However, it's even more remarkable that European teachers at the school were careful not to influence their African students too much. They wanted them to maintain their Africanacity. Muafangejo trained at Rorke from 1968 to 1969. Even though he produced a number of tapestries and paintings while at Rorke, Muafangejo is known almost entirely as a printmaker. Under the influence of his teacher, Azaria Mabata, Muafangejo developed his artistic abilities and preference for linocut as a medium. Now, why lino? Well, two possible reasons. One, the skills Muafangejo learned as a young boy was similar to the technique and skills required for linocut. In his traditional environment, the men were expected to be cattle herders, hunters, and providers, but they were also expected to be creative. They created domestic utensils from wood, drums, leather garments, pottery, baskets, and weapons such as spears and knopkieries. Reason number two is that lino was easy to transport around, and you could take it almost anywhere. It was easy for art students to take their linoleum sheets to their dorms and keep carving at night while chatting. One also does not require a fancy printing press for lino. You can do a beautiful print by simply using a teaspoon. When Muafangejo had access to the necessary equipment and materials, he produced an impressive body of woodworks and intaglio prints. In intaglio, he used etching, and he was particularly adept in the use of dry point, where the image is scratched directly into the plate. Despite Rorke being a super special place and a unique place for its time, Muafangejo's experience of life at the art center was extremely difficult. He was an intense, sensitive individual, and he thought deeply about various matters and expressed and questioned them through his art. He could not speak isiZulu or Sesotho. He experienced feelings of isolation and severe depression. His intense focus on his art led to nervous exhaustion at the end of his first year at Rorke. He suffered from depression for which he had to be hospitalized. He finally completed his course at Rorke and returned to Namibia, the country he loved deeply. From 1970, he taught art at his former school in Odiba. 5 years later, Muafangejo returned to Rorke to work as an artist in residence. Although he suffered greatly due to manic depression, he always tried to not impose this on his family and friends, but he took his medicine and locked himself in his room until he felt that he could cope with life. In 1977, Muafangejo left Rorke once again, returning to Namibia for good. Muafangejo's international breakthrough came when he exhibited in London. An art critic rated his linocuts consistently the best of all the modern art masters. Various historians expressed the same opinion. Invitations to other exhibitions and write-ups on his work soon followed. He also received recognition for his outstanding printmaking at the Sao Paulo Biennial in 1971, the Museum of African Art in Washington, D.C. in 1974, and the Brooklyn Museum of Art in New York in 1976. During the 1980s, his work was exhibited regularly in the United Kingdom, Finland, and Germany. He visited Finland in 1981, a trip that possibly united him with his teacher, Azaria Mabata, who left South Africa and has been living in Sweden since 1970. Muafangejo died in his house just outside Windhoek of a heart attack in 1987. That same year, he was a guest artist at the Grahamstown Arts Festival. Muafangejo has yearned for Namibia's independence, but he did not live to see it happen. One of his deepest wishes, however, did come true 1 year after his death. The John Muafangejo Art Center was opened, and it offers art classes to aspiring artists from a previous disadvantaged background. Let's take a closer look at 5 characteristics of John Muafangejo's unique art style. Number 1. His style was expressive and stylized. Muafangejo's style is characterized by simplified shapes with an expressive version of reality. It is a highly decorative pattern-like style with the repetition of lines and shapes. This creates a strong rhythmic effect. Muafangejo's work could be classified as realism with a capital R. Not realism as in realistic, but rather realism which depicts society and daily occurrences without pretense. His work can also be associated with German Expressionism, because the emotion or the narrative is more important than depicting everything in minor detail. And just like the German Expressionist, he sometimes distorts figures to aid in the communication of emotion. Number 2. Muafangejo implements a shallow depth of field in his artwork, and everything generally lacks depth and the use of a vanishing point. Most works are completed with 2-dimensional decorative backgrounds. Number 3. His artworks all have strong narratives. When asked about his style, he has said, "It is a teaching style. It is intended to communicate clearly to the viewer." Muafangejo conveys a story literally and figuratively in black and white, and he often captures a specific dramatic moment of that story. Many have described Muafangejo's artworks as naive, but they often include quite complex narratives, with interesting compositions, stories told within a circle, angles, crosses, and rectangular blocks. They are meant to be read in panels, such as a comic or triptychs. He produced interesting narratives with subtle comments and insights on the world around him. Number 4, he loves using text in his artworks. John Muafangejo was an artist that really wanted to be understood. He often describes and explains his narratives by adding text to an image. His English was not always eloquent or correct. It was not his first language. In 1985, he said, "I am the only educated one of my family, so the responsibility is mostly mine. I cannot go overseas anymore. There is no money." Much of the text in his artworks is in English, and so his art is aimed at white viewers. He presented the European audience with a dignified view of Black people's everyday lives, challenging their perspective and their gaze. The text used in his artworks confirms that these works are documentations of actual events and incidents rather than stories. At times, the text in the artwork becomes so important that it resembles a page of medieval illuminated manuscripts. Muafangejo explains his intentions clearly. "I am preaching. I am passing a message." Number 5. Muafangejo's use of color. Muafangejo's art is predominantly done in black and white. There is a stark contrast found in Linocut prints. Depending on the specific artwork, the black and white in his Linocut prints could symbolize a few meanings. One meaning could refer to the racial tensions at the time in both Namibia and apartheid South Africa. The black and white printing colors could also represent the struggle between good and evil, and it could also refer to the duality that is part of life in general and underlines all human activities and events. When asked about the lack of color in his artworks, John Muafangejo stated that he enjoyed creating black and white artworks since it does not tire the eyes of the viewer, allowing them to engage with the story for longer. I am quickly going to take you through the lino printmaking process. First, you draw your desired picture onto your lino sheet. With your lino tools, you carve out the areas you would like to keep white. So it's the opposite of drawing. You are carving the areas around the black lines, basically the negative space. Once you are done carving, you apply ink with a roller. You carefully place the lino sheet onto a piece of paper. And now you need to apply lots of pressure. You can either do this using a printing press or a teaspoon. The ink will now be transferred from the sheet to the paper. Carefully remove the lino sheet to reveal the result. And well done, now you've got your first print. So as you can see, this printmaking process generates a mirror image. So when you carve text, you have to carve it backwards. The wonderful thing about lino is that you can keep printing the same image multiple times. Professional artists usually decide how many prints they want to make of a specific design. For example, 50. Each print will then be numbered 1 out of 50, 2 out of 50, 3 of 50, and so forth. Now, John Muafangejo was a master printer. He kept a meticulous record of everything he produced. He was very responsible in the way that he issued limited edition prints. You'll see the CXD here at the top left corner and the date. This is essential because it means that this print has been cancelled and can never be reprinted. This is vital to art investors as it prevents fakes from entering the art market. Now let's look at the subject matter in John Muafangejo's artworks. John Muafangejo's oeuvre of work is autobiographical in nature and reflects the state of his mind and his daily experiences, almost like a diary. They include the following categories. Number 1, tribal life. Many of his artworks provide us with essential snapshots of the Ovambo traditions and rituals. This culture is under threat. Christianity arrived among the Ovambo people in the 19th century, and Ovambos predominantly converted and identified themselves as Lutheran Christians. Now, the influence of the missionaries not only related to the religion, but to cultural practices as well. For example, the typical dress style of the contemporary Ovambo woman, which includes a headscarf and a long loose dress, is derived from the 19th century Finnish missionaries. The Ovambo now predominantly follow Christian theology, prayer rituals, and festivities, but some traditional religious practices have continued. Most weddings feature a combination of Christian beliefs and Ovambo traditions. With his artworks, John Muafangejo keeps the memory of the Ovambo tribe alive. Number 2. Church life. Now, as you remember, John Muafangejo came from a rural traditional background and had to make his way in the Western art world. His family was part of rural African culture, yet he became a deeply devoted Christian. He really struggled to reconcile the brutal politics of the day with Christianity. His artwork portrays a message of deep human feelings and hope and an intense belief in the dignity of all human beings. And he often depicts the church's social role in resisting and opposing the inhumane and unjust apartheid regime. Number 3. Social conditions. John Muafangejo was not a protest artist. However, he did comment and record on the social inequalities and conditions in his art as he went about recording everyday life. Number 4. Local historical events. One of Muafangejo's most famous artworks is probably the Battle of Rorke done in 1981. This artwork was inspired by a teaching aide at the Rorke Art School. It was an oil painting done by a noble artist that was paid by the British to depict the famous Battle of Rorke. In this original painting, the British are depicted as heroes. The Battle of Rorke was one of the favorite subject matters of the students of the Rorke Arts and Crafts Center. They enjoyed depicting their local history. Now, in this original painting that they were shown, notice these crates in the front. And now let's look at John Muafangejo's version. He created his own version of the battle, but he reversed the entire composition. In Muafangejo's artwork, the Zulu warriors are active and dynamic. They are dominating the artwork. And they seem to have cornered the British in one of those biscuit crates, or maybe the small hospital building that was standing at Rorke at the time. Another famous artwork by John Muafangejo is called Natal, where the art school is, created in 1974. It is a bird's eye view of where the Rorke Arts and Crafts Center was located. Cutting through the picture is the Buffalo River with a little island, and that's where the actual drift was, where it was easy for wagons to cross the river. In the bottom right-hand corner, we see the text, where the art school is, and this refers to the two tiny little buildings in the foreground. In the print, we see all the daily activities, cattle herding, huts, sheep, and farming. In this artwork, he shows us that art is part of the community. Number 5. Personal experiences. Muafangejo's work is filled with touches of humor, experiences, and observations. I love the story depicted in the work known as The Lucky Artist. There was an announcement on the Ovambo radio that Muafangejo has won a silver cup for a specific print. Muafangejo did not know for which art exhibition he won the award, but he decided to celebrate by making this print. But there was just as well, for in the end he did not receive a cup at all, and although very disappointed, Muafangejo typically does not show this in his print. Number 6. Traveling. John Muafangejo traveled pretty extensively in what is now known as Namibia, in South Africa, and on several occasions to Europe, the UK, and Scandinavia. The Swedish missionaries who ran the Arts and Crafts Center at Rorke made much of this possible. Wherever he was, he usually depicted something of his experience in his artworks, keenly observing the life and people around him, with his typical social commentary and engaging sense of humor. He recorded his travel experiences with Linocuts, such as flying on British Airways, traveling in a little boat from Finland to an island. And I love this one called Snow was making the artist fall down twice in Finland. For someone traveling from the blazing hot Namibia to Finland, experiencing the slipperiness of snow must have been quite a funny ordeal. Number 7. Animals. John Muafangejo looked after cattle as a young boy, and he became aware of the power and beauty and danger of animals. In his work, he often depicts the tenderness and respect for both animals and human life, showing that we are not so different in Africa. 3 artworks you should know by John Muafangejo. Number 1. Kuanyama Wedding. Muafangejo depicts the ancient wedding traditions of his community. He depicts the topic of Ovambo weddings in various artworks. This gives us an indication of how important this event was within the traditional environment. The work creates awareness of the complexity of tribal life, its responsibilities, relationships, and hierarchy. The composition is filled with 5 figures: the grooms, the drummers, and the 2 brides with their back towards us. Muafangejo describes the scene clearly in the caption at the top of the composition. The traditional clothing of the brides in the print is significant. Traditionally, the girls were required to follow a strict initiation ritual when they reached marriageable age. This ceremony is both a rite of puberty and a group marriage ceremony. It would only occur every 3 or 4 years when enough girls could participate. The ceremonies were held over 4 days and were supposed to prepare the girls for the toughness awaiting them. Continuous dancing to the sounds of drums played by men was part of the ceremony. After this, the girls had to attend a field school for 8 weeks, during which they were forced to fend for themselves. As preparation for the field school, they had to create a unique headdress that was supposed to test their endurance, as they had to create it in the blazing sun. The headdress is characterized by 5 horn-like points, in which the front 3 symbolizes the bull and the back the cow. After the 8 weeks, they were covered in white ash and presented to their grooms. The young women would continue to wear the headdress as a sign that they have achieved marriage status. Muafangejo emphasizes the women's appearance, as they are portrayed as larger than the men. The drummer seems really expressive in his movement. Look at the detail of his hands, emphasizing the rhythm. The 2 bridegrooms raises their arms and their hats in one hand, recognizing their bride's performances. The drummer and the bridegroom wears the uvambu knives. With this artwork, Muafangejo keeps the memory of this tradition alive. Artwork number 2. New Archbishop Desmond Tutu enthroned. The announcement in 1986 that the new Archbishop of Cape Town would be Desmond Tutu was big news in South Africa. It was the first South African black archbishop. The country was still in the grip of apartheid, and the eyes of the world were upon it. Muafangejo documented this memorable event for South Africans with his Linocut. The work consists of 2 strips of imagery with a caption underneath it. The top depicts the new Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The shape of his head is exaggerated. His robe with a chain contributes to the significance of his position. His facial expression is solemn, and he points a finger to the crucifixion of Jesus to remind people that they should not forget why they are there. From the left, a white dove enters the composition, symbolizing the Holy Spirit entering Bishop Tutu. Next to the crucifix, we see 2 cupped hands, one white and one black, in prayer, symbolizing that Jesus died for all races. In the strip below, the church is jam-packed. People are depicted, one black, one white, spread equally throughout the rectangle, with friendly facial expressions. In the top row, a white and black man stretches their arms to take each other's hands, encircling 3 other people. And this artwork is a clear sign of the integration of the church in defiance to the country's apartheid laws. The inscription at the bottom is a blessing, as Muafangejo supports the changes occurring in South Africa. And the third and final artwork for this video is called Judas Iscariot betrayed our Lord Jesus Christ for 3 rand. This artwork needs to be read right to left and tells the story of Judas Iscariot betraying Jesus Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. First, Muafangejo depicts the scene where Judas is kissing Jesus in a dramatic embrace. On the left, we see the shocking scene of Judas' suicide. He hanged himself after realizing the gravity of his deed. In the first square, Judas is portrayed expressively in a position that looks like a serpent entwining Jesus. The print on his long dress resembles the scales of a snake. It is in stark contrast with Jesus' dress that is depicted with fine, peaceful lines. This could symbolize the idea that Judas was possessed by the devil at the time. The title, Judas Iscariot betrayed our Lord Jesus for 3 rand, immediately draws our attention as he used the South African currency. It was the amount of money that Judas was willing to take to be bribed. In the Bible, it is stated that Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Now, when Muafangejo created the work, a 1 rand was not a coin but a note. Now, 3 rand was worth more a lot back then, but it was still not a lot of money. What Muafangejo is implying that Judas would have done anything for any amount of money. Looking closely, you can see Jesus' feet are depicted in a frontal position, which creates the feeling that he is floating. The 2 men on the right are armed. One holds a knopkierie and the other an axe. These were soldiers and not disciples, probably on their way to arrest Jesus. Both have swords tied around their waists. In the last panel, Muafangejo depicts the tree with large simplified leaves, representing the shape of the dagger. He also depicts the 3 1 Rand notes scattered loosely on the ground. His caption is dramatic and informative and conveys the moral of the story. He wanted this artwork to contain a message for the viewer, much like Jesus' parables. And that's an overview of this remarkable artist, John Muafangejo's trailblazing, award-winning, and trend-setting art career. Today, Muafangejo is celebrated as Namibia's most famous artist. In a relatively short working career, he produced over 260 prints, influencing generations of printmakers in southern Africa. His artworks contains humor, social realism, contemporary history, mythology, religion, and the culture of the Ovambu tribe. Even though John Muafangejo did not see the independence of Namibia, the violent struggle for it formed the background for his art. Today, John Muafangejo's legacy remains ever present in Namibia. You can shop various John Muafangejo merchandise, and there's even a soundtrack to commemorate his life. I'm artist Lillian Gray, and I love teaching art and art history. I hope you enjoyed this story. Remember to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified when a new video is released. This is a reminder that you can shop various worksheets for all ages online on our Teachers Pay Teachers website. Go ahead and connect with us on social media and let us know which video you would like to see next. Until next time!